All right, so now I know yesterday we saw it, like looking at number 48, we learned the method that I call the diamond method. Remember, again, I know we did 48 yesterday, but I remember we're looking at two numbers that multiplied equals 63, but when I add them is equal to 16, and we figure out 7 and 9. And then from that one, we went directly to x plus 7, x plus 9. We can do that. We can do that when my first numbered, the very, very first number of my whole question, it's a 1. Right? We can do that when my first number is a 1. Now, when it is not a 1, so now looking at question number 50, when it is not a 1, there's going to be a twist to it. Just a small twist. So what we're going to be doing, I'm still going to start with my diamond method. I want to start thinking with my diamond. I'm looking at two numbers that when I multiplied, in this case, my two numbers have to equal to negative 40. All right. That way I came out with my negative 40 because I multiplied my first number and my last number. That's how I came out with the negative 40. So again, I'm looking for two numbers that when I multiply them, it's equal to negative 40. When I add my numbers, still equal to negative 3. All right, so when I add, it's still the number in the middle. That doesn't change. But now when I multiply these two numbers, they have to equal to negative 40. Again, I multiply my first and my last numbers. So I start thinking, all right, I know multiplication equals a negative. My signs are different. One of them is positive and one of them is negative. And I start thinking, all right, what two numbers multiplied equals 40? And when I subtract them is equal to 3, I start thinking, and I'm going to come out with 5 and 8. Positive 5, negative 8. Now, I'm not going to go directly to parentheses like we did yesterday. So no, I don't go directly to parentheses. Instead, this positive 5, this negative 8, that's how I am going to split my middle term. So let me write 5x squared plus 5x minus 8x minus 8. Focus that my middle term was a negative 3. And I split it as 5 minus 8. So I did my diamond method to find out how I am going to split my middle term. And then notice I wrote everything as it was. I just split my middle term. And then I see that my question here, I have 4 terms. So from 3, I split it to 4. But then I remember that yesterday I said when we have 4 terms, let's take a look at the first 2 only. I can divide each by 5. I can remove an x from each. I'm going to do the distributive property backwards. Divide everything by 5. Remove an x. So that's going to give me x plus 1. And then I take a look at the last 2. I see that I can divide each by a negative 8. Again, I'm going to do the distributive property backwards. When I divide each of my terms by a negative 8, that gives me x plus 1. I want my parentheses to match. Now they do. So my factor for question number 50, my factor will be x plus 1. That's one of my factors, right? The parentheses that repeats. And my other factor will be 5x minus 8. Let me highlight where I got that from. 5x minus 8. Now that's my answer. These two parentheses are my answer. Now, which one goes first? It doesn't matter. On your homework, like I mentioned yesterday, on your homework, I'm allowed to put in more than one correct answer. So I did 2 possible answers. You put the x plus 1 first, or you put the 5x minus 8 first. On the homework, it will allow either one to be correct. If you don't believe me, try it. Now, on the quiz, I'm allowed to only put in one answer as the correct answer. So I will take a look. So type it in. If it marks it wrong because you put it the other way compared to how I had it, It was gonna mark it wrong, but I will go back later and check it, and then I'm gonna fix the score. So more likely I'm gonna check it Monday morning. So don't expect it today, but I will. I promise I will. All right, let's take a look at number 51. I'm gonna start by doing my diamond method, and I'm gonna think of two numbers that when I multiplied is equal to negative 35, but when I add my numbers is equal to a negative 2. And again, my negative 35 because I multiply my first and my last number. So that's going to give me a negative 7 and a positive 2. Oh, no, incorrect. A negative 7 and a positive 5. Okay, Francisco, I got you. Okay, so then, like I'm not going to go directly to parentheses. I'm going to use the negative 7 and the positive 5 just to split my middle term. So let me rewrite this as 5x squared minus 7x plus 5x minus 7. I just rewrote my question, but my negative 2, I split it as a negative 7 plus 5. Just because I wanted 4 terms. Then I look at my first 2 terms. Numbers-wise, 5 and 7, nothing I can do. But I can at least factor out an x. So it's going to give me 5x minus 7. Now I look at the last 2. 5x minus 7. Number-wise, nothing I can do. Letter-wise, nothing I can do. But I have to divide them by something. I have to. So when nothing else works, I can always divide by 1. So matter of fact, let me include my sign. I can always divide by a positive 1. When I divide by a positive 1, nothing happens. So inside of the parentheses, I will have 5x minus 7. So my factors are going to be 5x minus 7 and x plus 1. Let's move on. Let's take a look at number 52. I'm going to start my diamond by saying, all right, I need my numbers that when I multiplied is equal to, and I think, all right, 5 times a negative 27, I get 135. So negative 135. And when I add my numbers, it has to add up to 42. Because they multiplied is equal to negative. So basically, I'm subtracting my numbers. Now, this one, probably cannot think of it to begin with. So let me just use this side. I'm going to erase this in a minute. I'm just going to use it for right now. I start thinking, all right, what are the factors of 135? What that means is which two numbers multiplied equals 135. And I start 1 times 135. But when I subtract them, I don't get 42. Then I said, all right, how about 2? I'm going to start going to my list. 1, 2, 3, 4, until one of them works. Then I would say 135 divided by 2 gives me a decimal. So that one doesn't work. 135 divided by 3 gives me 45. So I know, so 3 times 45 equals 135. I know if I subtract those two numbers, I get 42. All right, so there, I found it. I'm going to say positive 45, negative 3. That's what I was looking for. Positive 45, negative 3. Now, when I split my middle term, I have 5x squared plus 45x minus 3x minus 27. When my first number is not a 1, I have to do my diamond method to split my middle term. All right, so now looking at my first 2 terms, I can divide each by 5, and I can remove an x from each. So that's going to give me x plus 9. Looking at the last 2 numbers, I can divide each by a -3. And that's going to give me x plus 9. So my factors are going to be x plus 9 and 5x minus 3. Cool. Take a look at one of these again. Take a look at one more example. I'm looking at two numbers that when I multiplied is equal to -70, but when I add my numbers is equal to -3. When I multiplied is negative, so I know my signs are different. All right, so I'm start thinking, all right, what are the factors of 70? Again, I'm gonna use this space, but I'm gonna write them in I'm gonna erase them in a little, and I know 1 times 70. But when I subtract 1 and 70, it doesn't work. I'm gonna go in 2, 3, 4, 5, as far as I need to go. Start thinking, all right, 70 divided by 2 gives me 35. So I know 2 times 35 is 70, but when I subtract my numbers, I don't get a 3. Now 70 divided by 3 gives me a decimal. All right, so 3 doesn't work. 70 divided by 4 gives me a decimal as well. 70 divided by 5, I get 14. All right, so 5 times 14 is 70, but when I subtract them, it's not 3. 70 divided by 6 gives me a decimal, so that one doesn't work. 70 divided by 7 gives me 10. So I know 7 times 10 is 70. When I subtract those numbers, I get a 3. All right, so that's what I need. I need the bigger number to be negative because I get -3. So I'm going to call this +7, -10. Now let me erase this. So that's how we get with the factors in case we cannot think of them. So I'm going to split my middle term. So let me write 2x squared plus 7x minus 10x minus 35. I look at the first two terms. Numbers wise, nothing I can do. 2 and 7, nothing I can do. But I can factor an x out. So it's going to give me 2x plus 7. Now I take a look at the last two. I can factor a negative sign, but I can also divide them by a -5. So I'm dividing by a negative, so switch the sign. Dividing by 5, so make sure you divide by 5. And that's going to give me 2x plus 7. Notice I divided each by a -5. My parentheses match. So my factors are going to be 2x plus 7 and x minus 5. My first parentheses is the parentheses that matches. The x minus 5 is basically what I have on the outside. Now this one, let's take a look. I'm thinking, I'm going to do my diamond. I'm thinking two numbers that multiplied as equal to 64, but when I add my numbers is -65. And guess what? -1, -64. Multiplied equals 64, added equals -65. So I'm going to split my middle term. So let me go 8k squared minus 1k minus 64k plus 8. Looking at the first two terms, I can only factor out a k. So they're going to give me 8k minus 1. Looking at the last two terms, I can divide each by a -8. So that's going to give me 8k minus 1. And my factors are going to be 8k minus 1 and k minus 8. Hoping you guys are like, yeah, this is not too bad. Take a look at this other one. Let's take a look at 55. I'm looking for two numbers that when I multiplied is 90. Remember my 90 because I multiplied the first and the last number, 10 times 9. So I'm looking for two numbers that when I multiply equals 90, but when I add my numbers, is equal to negative 21. So I'm dealing with two negatives. And I'm like, all right, the factors of 90. Again, I'm on as they, all right, 1 times 90. That one doesn't work. How about 2? 90 divided by 2 is 45. But when I add this, is not 21. How about 3? 3 times 30. Yeah, that one's not 21. 90 divided by 4 doesn't work. Gives me a decimal. Now, 90 divided by 5 gives me 18. But when I add these numbers, it's not 21. How about 6? 90 divided by 6 gives me 15. All right, that's what I need. So negative 6, negative 15. Let me erase this. For space purpose, let me erase this. So I'm just going to split my middle term. So let me go 10b squared minus 6b minus 15b plus 9. Looking at the first two terms, 10 and 6, I can divide each by 2. Letter-wise, I can remove a b. So that's going to give me 5b minus 3. Looking at the last two terms, I can divide each by a negative 3. And that's going to give me 5b minus 3. So my factors are going to be 5b minus 3, because that's the parentheses that matches, and 2b minus 3. I want us to completely get this idea. So let me do a couple more. I'm looking for two numbers. I know 6 times 25, it's 150. So two numbers that multiplied is equal to 150. But when I add my numbers, is equal to negative 25. I'm dealing with two negatives. As a matter of fact, I'm dealing with negative 10 and negative 15. So I'm going to go 6k squared minus 10k minus 15k plus 25. Looking at the first two terms, I can divide each by 2 and I can remove a k. So that gives me 3k minus 5. Looking at the last two terms, I can divide each by a negative 5. So it's going to give me 3k minus 5. And my factors are going to be 3k minus 5 and 2k minus 5. Beautiful. All right, I think with one more, you guys should be okay. So let's see. I'm looking at two numbers that when I multiply, it equals 180. But when I add, is equal to negative 29. I know I'm dealing with two negatives here. Let's see, 180 divided by 2, 2 and 90. No, they don't work. 180 divided by 3 gives me 3 and 60. No. 180 divided by 4. The numbers that I'm looking for are going to be, let's see, 180 divided by 8. It's going to be 9 and 20. Negative 9, negative 20. So I'm going to have 6b squared minus 9b minus 20b plus 30. Looking at the first two terms, number-wise, I can divide each by 3, and I can remove a b. So that's going to give me 2b minus 3. Looking at the last two terms, I can divide each by a negative 10. So that's going to give me 2b minus 3. I want my parentheses to match. So I'm going to get 2b minus 3 and 3b minus 10. I know I did quite a good amount, but I wanted you guys to see it. That is not that difficult. When you do your pyramid, when you do the X thing, that's actually going to give you how to split the middle term. And from there, it's easy. Now here for number 58, we can do it the long way. I know how to do it when there's three terms. This one, I only see two terms. I'm going to do the first example the long way, but then I'm going to show you guys the short way. Let me change to red because we're switching topics here. I can rewrite this as 9x squared plus 0x minus 4. Notice the middle term, I added a 0x. That means I don't have an x. I just added that just so I can see that I have three terms. And then I do my diamond method. I'm looking for two numbers that when I multiply it is equal to negative 36. But when I add my numbers is equal to 0. Now I'm going to say, well, that's negative 6 and positive 6. And I can split my middle term. So let me write this as 9x squared minus 6x plus 6x minus 4. When I look at my first two terms, I can divide each by 3 and remove an x. And that's going to give me 3x minus 2. When I see the other one, I can divide each by 3. In fact, by a positive 3. And it's going to give me 3x minus 2. So my factors are going to be 3x minus 2. Actually, I divided by 2, my bad. And then 3x plus 2. So 3x minus 2, 3x plus 2. Now, I'm going to say something. The easy way we can do this, I can do when there's two terms, and I can do the square root on each. The square root of 9x squared is 3x. Notice how the square root of 9x squared, that's how I'm going to start each of my parentheses, 3x. I see the end. The square root of 4 is 2. Notice that's how I ended my parentheses. One of them has a minus, one of them has a plus. So let me do the short way on this next question. I can do it the long way, but let me do this the short way. When I do the square root of 9x squared, that gives me 3x. When I do the square root of 16, that gives me a 4. So my parentheses, one of them is going to be 3x plus 4, and the other one is going to be 3x minus 4. One of my parentheses has a plus sign. One of them has a minus sign. That works every time I can do the square root of my first term, the square root of the last term, and I have a minus in between. That rule, we're going to call it the difference of the squares. Difference because I have to have a minus in between, and squares because I did the square root on each of them. So let's see. Let's do the short way on this one. I see a minus in between, so I can do it. The square root of 4m squared is 2m. The square root of 25 is 5. So one of my parentheses will be 2m minus 5, and the other one is 2m plus 5. One of them has a plus sign, one of them has a minus sign. It doesn't matter which one comes first. Intentionally, in the previous question, my first parentheses had a plus. This one has a minus first. It doesn't matter. Let's take a look at number 61. Let me do the square root on each. The square root of 4n squared is 2n. The square root of 1 is 1. So my parentheses, one of them is going to be 2n plus 1. And the other one is going to be 2n minus 1. And there's another special case. There's this one, number 62 through 65. I can do the long way. right? I'm looking for two numbers that multiply equals to 9. But when I add them is equal to 6, I'm going to split my middle term. That works. We can do it the long way. But there's one interesting part. If I can do the square root of the first one, that gives me 3b. And I can do the square root of the last one, which it gives equals to 1. If I multiply this, so this trick works when we have three terms. If I multiply the first term, so 3b times 1, and it's equal to the half of my middle term. Keep in mind I said half. If 3b times 1 is equal to half of the positive 6, which in this case it is, my parentheses are going to have 3b plus 1 twice. The exact same parentheses twice. I'm going to get the plus 1 from the sign in the middle. So if the sign in the middle was minus 6b, I would have had 3b minus 1, so minus 1 twice. The plus or minus is going to come from the sign in the middle. All right, let's take a look. The square root of 9b squared is 3b. So I did the square root. The square root of 4 is 2. 3b times 2 is half of the middle term. So this is a special case. I noticed the middle term is a plus 12b. So it has a plus sign. So I'll respect the sign. So I'm going to have 3b plus 2 twice. We call this the perfect square because you have the same parentheses twice. All right, let's take a look at question number 64. I do the square root of x squared, so that gives me x. The square root of 25, that gives me 5. 5 times x is the half of the middle term, right? 5x is the half of 10x. So it is a special case because my middle term is plus 10x. So I'm going to keep the plus. So I'm going to have x plus 5 twice. If we were to write this, sometimes they even write this as x plus 5 squared, which means x plus 5 twice. But I'm going to have you guys, because of the exponent, let's just type x plus 5 twice. Don't forget the parentheses. Take a look at my last example for this. If I do the square root of 9r squared, I get 3r, right? The square root of 9, square root of r squared. If I get the square root of 25, I get 5. I know 3 times 5 is 15, which is the half of 30. So I have a special case. The middle term has a plus sign, so I'll respect the sign. If it had a minus, I will keep the minus. So I said respect the sign from the middle. So that gives me 3r plus 5 twice. This is the older special case. Let me zoom out. In blue, we started looking at when we have 3 terms. I wanted us to look at that. In red, I have special cases. We have special cases. I know this is a summer class, so I had to combine them all in one shot. In the regular year, it goes a little bit slower. But the special cases, 58 through 61, the difference of the square. So there's a minus and 2 squares. The last 4, perfect squares, because I get the same parentheses twice.